Hi, I'm Kit. This is me. I used to be thin, now I'm a whale, but that's not important right now. One day I woke up and we were all living in a zombie apocalypse. Not cool! So everyone stayed home and watched YouTube. Hooray! I watched for a while and liked what some people were doing so much that I decided to have a go too. I've always been a big film buff, and back when I was skinny and had hair, I used to make films with my friends. Some even had royal premieres. So although I don't make films anymore, I still like to talk about them, and that's what this channel is all about, at least for now. So, good people of the apocalypse, I'm Kit, and this is my world. Hello good people, hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm in a green environment because it's spooky. I'm doing horror today, specifically werewolf films. These are the films that I grew up loving as a kid, probably from the age of about 6 or 8. I first discovered the old Universal werewolf films starring Lon Chaney Jr. and my dad used to videotape them for me late at night so that I could watch them first thing in the morning and not disturb my mum and dad in bed. I didn't think about that side of things. I just knew that there was a brand new black and white horror film waiting for me every morning, starring Lon Chaney Jr. or Bela Lugosi or any of the old contract players from Universal Studios. There were Dracula films and Mummy films, Boris Karloff, and the werewolf films were my favourite. I always had a deep-seated fear of wolves from as far back as I can remember, which was entirely the fault of my mum, who got me a tape of Peter and the Wolf, which is a classical music orchestral piece by Prokofiev. It tells the story of a boy who encounters a wolf and all the various terrible things that ensue. It's told largely by the instruments of the orchestra, but there is a narrator as well. However, it was the wolf leitmotif played on the French horns that sent shivers down my spine. It chilled me to the core. It filled my nighttime thoughts and dreams with terrible imagery, much worse than any horror film could possibly have done. It was a purely musical thing. It went deep into my psyche and affected me for my entire life. However, despite being a lifelong fearer of werewolves, I discovered a love and appreciation for the real life wolves that live in the wild. And I've always loved them. I would never ever want any harm to come to a wolf, or indeed a werewolf if such things existed. But I do find that my love of werewolf films grows from the initial fear that I had as a very young child, which then became fascination and thrill-seeking. So I grew up watching the old werewolf films, and as a teenager, when I was 13 or 14, I teamed up with my very good friend Oscar Yernik, who is now a successful and in fact award-winning Turkish film director. We studied film together, and when we weren't making films as part of our film studies, we did our own personal projects just on cheap video cameras that we owned ourselves. And Oscar came up with the idea for a werewolf film that he wanted to make, and because at that time I was very interested in special effects, and in particular special makeup effects, he asked me if I would be willing to be the werewolf in his film and do a werewolf makeup on myself. This I did. As you will see from the clip I'm showing, my werewolf makeup was based on the Lon Chaney Jr. model. This is based on two factors, the first one being I was not adequately equipped and did not have the necessary skills and expertise to create a Rick Baker style werewolf with fully prosthetic face parts and an animatronic head. I couldn't do that, and I couldn't afford that either, which was another consideration, money. So I went for the easy, cheap solution, which was the Lon Chaney Jr. wolf, which is essentially yak hair glued all over your face. And you can see how it looks. Wasn't hugely impressive, it certainly wasn't scary, in fact it was slightly comical, but werewolves were in those days, unless you were a Rick Baker werewolf. So me and Oz and another friend of his, John, teamed up and started shooting this werewolf film. We shot some interior scenes setting up the story with entirely ad-libbed dialogue. We spent days and days shooting this scene from every conceivable angle and had an enormous amount of fun. And then we went into the woods near where Oz lived, Richmond Woods I believe, and shot lots of scenes of me and John running around chasing each other, and then we shot the transformation scene. And all of this very lengthy introduction leads me to my discussion about my favourite werewolf films, and there are only 3, and it's a very easy list to compile. At joint first place are the 2 best werewolf films ever made, which are An American Werewolf in London and The Howling. It's impossible for me to decide which of these 2 films would take top spot, because they're both equally excellent and equally flawed. So I chose to let them share that position. American Werewolf in London is undoubtedly the most celebrated werewolf film. It got the Oscar for Best Makeup for Rick Baker, deservedly so, and it has arguably the best transformation scene in any werewolf film ever made. However, at the same time, the pre-production wheels were in motion for The Howling, and Rick Baker was originally attached to do the makeup for that, but he had previously promised John Landis many years before that if Landis ever made American Werewolf in London, Baker would do the makeup for that. So when Landis discovered that The Howling was about to get made, he went into overdrive and threw together the pre-production for American Werewolf in London in record time, and Baker had to leave The Howling and go and work on American Werewolf in London for Landis. The makeup transformation sequence for that was entirely Rick Baker's design, and it was innovative and no one had ever seen anything like it before. And it's fabulous. It deserved the Oscar. However, it was shot in bright, glaring light, and this is something that takes away the mystery and the fear factor. It's not scary, it's fascinating to look at. It's immensely impressive. You can see every detail of the makeup, every hair, every nuance of wrinkled skin is visible because it's shot in harsh light. And this made it a fabulous show reel, a fabulous demonstration of what Rick Baker's workshop could create, and it was an iconic cinema scene. But it wasn't scary, and getting scared is one of the main reasons that people want to see a werewolf film. So The Howling used a lot of Rick Baker's techniques and elaborated on them and invented some techniques all of its very own, and one of the main ones was a fabulous experimental speeding up and slowing down of the footage. So the breathing of the wolf during transformation was incredibly rapid, far more rapid than a human being would achieve, and there were speed ramps and all sorts of things involved that made it particularly jarring to the eye and to the senses. And it was shot in darkness. It was very, very dark. You couldn't really see. There was lots of silhouette material and backlighting and side lighting. And The whole thing was just incredibly creepy and scary. The sound design also helped enormously with this. There wasn't a 1950s pop song playing in the background. I think it was Blue Moon, I think, was the tune that the transformation happened for American Werewolf. In The Howling, it was just scary music and fabulous sound effects, darkness, weird breathing and twitching and stuff that was just bizarre and scary and freaky, and really good makeup, a different style of makeup. These the werewolves in The Howling are standing upright type werewolves, which are actually my preferred type. The werewolf in American Werewolf in London is a one on all fours, a quadruped, and that's kind of silly. You shouldn't have quadrupedal werewolves because you end up with an actor having to walk around on hands and feet or hands and knees, and it looks silly, it's not natural, it doesn't work, spoils it. Have them walking upright. Preferably have them on some sort of mini stilts or something so that they're extra tall and don't look quite so human. There are various films that have experimented with this. Dog Soldiers springs to mind. Well, that's another fabulous film, actually. I should have added that to the list, but it's not on the list, but it's an honourable mention. Dog Soldiers, fabulous British werewolf film, also very funny, but very scary at the same time. So, American Werewolf in London and The Howling are equally fabulous for different reasons and equally flawed for other reasons. The Howling is a little bit cheap and tatty in places. It hasn't aged very well. American Werewolf in London is a little bit glossier, but it has Muppets in it. It has stupid dream sequences. I'm sorry, but I really don't like the dream sequences. I'm okay with the guy running naked through the woods. That's an okay dream sequence, but it's the Muppets and the Nazis and all of that weird stuff and the cliche of lying in the bed in the woods and then opening his eyes and with the joke teeth. It's just a little bit silly now, it spoils it. I would rather have a straightforward story with scary music, dark lighting, a fabulous transformation and lots of carnage. Possibly my favourite thing about American Werewolf in London now is actually the friend played by Griffin Dunne, who makes recurrent appearances throughout the film after his death as an increasingly rotting corpse, and that's a lovely touch. I like that. It's funny and appropriate. It's not too surreal. It's within keeping for the general mood and flavour of the film, and it's unique and original. I like that. The Howling has lots of lots of crappy hippie stuff going on, and it has some weird cameos from people that I'd prefer weren't actually in it, but it's got some really good scenes in the woods. The woods are creepy, the cabin in the woods is really creepy, the music is terrifying, and all in all it's a very good film. So both of them excellent films, joint first place for American Werewolf in London and The Howling. And the third film, the runner-up, is Silver Bullet. Silver Bullet by Stephen King is a favourite of mine because when I first saw it as a teenager, I found it genuinely scary. In particular, the scene in the potting shed where you can just see the werewolf's eyes watching the character from under the stairs. Very scary. Scary lighting, scary music, a scary scenario. I love it, and I love the idea of the werewolf in the potting shed anyway. I like the werewolf in the cabin in the woods in Howling. I like them being in scary places that are automatically scary without there even having to be a werewolf there. It's just a scary place, dilapidated old buildings separate from the rest of society. But anyway, so Silver Bullet had that in its favour, It also had a genuinely good and interesting story about the kid in the wheelchair, the motorised wheelchair, and his relationship with his sister, which played out very realistically. It was a very good representation of a sibling relationship, and both actors played it well, in particular Corey Haim, who was an instant star after that film, and deservedly so. It has Gary Busey as the crazy uncle in possibly the best role of his career, alongside Point Break. I love the relationship between the uncle and the kid in the wheelchair. I love the fact that the kid is in a wheelchair. It gives added fear. If you're trying to get away from a werewolf, being a cripple is going to add to the risk factor. I love the fact that the wheelchair keeps running out of gas. So you've got built-in scares with that. I love the dilapidated bridge across the creek. Perfect place for an ambush. I love the scene with the firework in the werewolf's eye. And I love the fact that alongside being a family drama and a werewolf film, it's also a mystery film. Guess Who's the Werewolf? Now this has been done before. It's been done with a film called The Beast Must Die, which was an Amicus film from the 1970s. And that film actually stopped halfway through, and a clock came up on the screen and a voiceover said, "See if you can guess who the wolf is." And I think it reprised some of the scenes and showed you all the characters in the style of an Agatha Christie whodunit, and then gave you a countdown to see if you can guess who the werewolf is, and then the film continued and you could see if you were correct. Silver Bullet didn't do that because that would be tacky, but what it did do is it gave you a cast of potential suspects, and unlike most werewolf films where you know who the wolf is all the way through, in Silver Bullet you're guessing who the wolf is all the way through, and the kid and his sister, and later on the uncle, are trying to find out who the werewolf is who's killing everyone in town. Brilliant idea, very original, very engaging. It gives multiple layers for the audience to sink their teeth into, if you'll excuse the pun, and all in all it's a marvellous film. Oh, and I love the ending as well. It has a few cliches, but they're good cliches. Things like the fumbling to load the bullet into the gun, and then he drops it and it goes down the grate, and he's got to squeeze his hand through the grate to try and get the bullet out. And there is only one bullet, the silver bullet, that he's had cast specially for the job. And the makeup's not bad either. There's one scene in it which, just like American Werewolf in London, is a stupid dream sequence where everyone in town turns into werewolves, and it's just silly, ridiculous, and spoils it. There seems to be a culture in werewolf movies of having these stupid dream sequences or stupid comedy scenes that I suppose are supposed to offer some kind of light relief, but all they do is they break the tension and they spoil the verisimilitude of the piece. I said verisimilitude, that's one of my favourite words. It's a word that means truthfulness, honesty, sincerity, realism, all of that type of stuff. Verisimilitude is something that I aspire to as a human being and as an occasional filmmaker, and it's something that I demand from my entertainment, whether it be film, TV, theatre or anything else. So, 3 classic werewolf films, joint first place American Werewolf in London and The Howling, and a very honourable runner-up, Silver Bullet, with the honourable mention of Dog Soldiers, which I only just thought of, which is a fabulous British werewolf film and contains exactly the right balance of horror and comedy. There you go. I hope you enjoyed it, and oh yes, please remember to do these things: like, subscribe, bell, all spacky, like, subscribe, I'll do it with graphics, like it, subscribe to it, ring the thing with the ding-a-ling-a-ling, and leave a comment. Only nice comments please, and I will endeavour to reply to comments that interest and amuse me, and I welcome suggestions. Please keep it friendly. I'm a nice guy, and I'm hoping that you're nice as well. So that's it. That's my werewolf video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.